Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is Angela at The Simple Quiet Life, and I wanted to share with you again this commonplace book that I found at an antique mall a couple weeks ago. And I know I showed it before in a video, but I'm going to go ahead and show it again because I have the project completed and I just wanted to make a record of it. This is going to be a long video. It's going to be over 30 minutes, but I'm not going to talk the whole time. I'm only going to talk part of the time and maybe put some music at the end. But my main purpose in doing this is just to preserve the memory of the book, because I'm actually getting ready to send this book off to a family member of Mr. Ralph Willard Messner, who wrote this book back in the year 1928, we believe. So as you could see, the cover was really worn. It's very old. It's approximately 98 years old. I'm using my letter opener to turn the pages as much as possible. I did wash my hands really well to try to get the oils off and be as careful as I could with the pages. We want to make sure we don't put any more wear and tear on them than we have to. And I'm just showing the pages. I'm going to try to show the pages as close up as I can on especially the maps and the newspaper articles and the little captions under the newspaper clippings later in the book. And you're welcome to pause the video at any point if you want to see some of the historical information that Mr. Messner recorded in his book. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and read to you a biographical account of his life. And I have permission from the family member to show his picture, so you will get to see his picture at the end of the video. So I hope you enjoy this, and I have had a wonderful time doing this project. I just love learning about people from the past and, you know, what their lives were like, what they accomplished in their lifetime. I personally think that it's really inspiring to read about people's lives and, you know, think about them. Think about the fact that they went through difficult times just like we are going through in our lives. And yet, look how they persevered. Look how they pressed on and continued to make a difference in their lives with the people who they lived with and near. And you're going to find out some pretty amazing things about this man, Ralph Messner. And I hope you enjoy this as much as I enjoyed putting it together. The title of the biography is 98 Years Later, The Voice of Ralph W. Messner Still Speaks. Dedicated to those who cherish the memory of Ralph Willard Messner. May his legacy live on in your hearts forever. "98 years later, the voice of Ralph W. Messner still speaks. Sometimes history is discovered in archives, libraries, and museums. Other times, it emerges from the cluttered shelves of an antique mall, waiting for someone curious enough to uncover its story. Such was the case with a commonplace book written in 1928 by Ralph W. Messner. Nearly a century after its creation, the small volume surfaced in an antique mall, its faded cover and worn yellowed pages preserving the work of a man long gone. What began as an intriguing antique soon became a window into the life of a dedicated teacher, family man, and WPA writer whose work continues to speak across the decades. Ralph Willard Messner was born on June 11th, 1896, in Montpelier, Ohio, to John George Messner and Christina Ebinger Messner. He was one of 10 children born into the Messner family. One of his siblings, a sister named Hulda Messner, lived only a brief life, passing away around 1890, several years before Ralph was born. Though Ralph never knew her, Hulda remained part of the family history as a reminder of the hardships many families faced during that era. Ralph grew up alongside his surviving brothers and sisters during a period of tremendous change in rural America. The values of hard work, education, and community that shaped his early years would remain central throughout his life. Like many young men of his generation, Ralph registered for military service during World War I. In the summer of 1918, he reported for a physical examination after registering for the draft. However, he was rejected because of a physical disability and was unable to serve. Although military service was not part of his life's journey, Ralph would devote himself to another important calling: teaching. By 1923, he was teaching at Whaley School near Eden, Ohio. His commitment to education and learning quickly became evident as he built a career in rural schools. In 1925, he taught at Alverton School, continuing his work with young students in northwestern Ohio. Amid these professional pursuits, Ralph established a family of his own. On November 26, 1924, he married Emily Genevieve Wyant in Huntington, Indiana. Together, they raised 6 children: Chester, Margaret, Betty, Arthur, Edward, and Ralph Jr. Family life and education would become the twin pillars around which much of Ralph's life revolved. In 1928, at the age of 32, Ralph created the Commonplace book that would one day lead modern researchers to his story. Unlike many commonplace books that contained favorite poems, literary quotations, or personal reflections, Ralph's volume served as a handwritten record of American history and current events. Carefully written pages documented the founding of the original states, the nation's presidents, and many of the prominent men who shaped the early United States. Rather than recording his own experiences, Ralph compiled information that reflected his deep interest in history, government, and the development of the nation. The notebook also contains newspaper clippings that provide a snapshot of America in the late 1920s. Articles discussing political issues and the upcoming presidential election were carefully preserved alongside Ralph's handwritten entries. References to Herbert Hoover and the political climate of the era revealed a teacher who was not only interested in the nation's past, but also attentive to the events unfolding around him. The combination of historical notes and contemporary news transformed the Commonplace book into a personal reference library, capturing both America's origins and the concerns of Ralph's own day. Today, the Commonplace book offers a rare glimpse into the intellectual life of a rural schoolteacher. Its pages reveal a man who valued knowledge and believed that history was worth preserving. Long before he would conduct historical research for the federal government, Ralph was already gathering, organizing, and recording information that he believed future generations should remember. The following year found him teaching at Hanlon School near Portland, Indiana. Hanlon was a rural, hewn log schoolhouse with a slate roof, a reminder of an earlier era of American education. In this simple one-room setting, Ralph taught local schoolchildren, helping prepare them for lives that would soon be shaped by the challenges of the Great Depression. His talents extended beyond the classroom. In 1936, at age 40, Ralph was selected to conduct research and writing for the Works Progress Administration, WPA, one of the cornerstone programs of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal. While the WPA is often remembered for its public construction projects, it also employed writers, historians, and researchers to preserve local history, folklore, and cultural traditions. Ralph's skills as an educator and writer made him well suited for this important work of documenting American life during a difficult chapter in the nation's history. Even after his WPA service, Ralph remained committed to teaching. Records indicate that he returned to Hanlon School in 1946 and taught there during other years as well, working with 5th and 6th grade students. Through decades in the classroom, he influenced countless young people, many of whom likely carried his lessons and encouragement long after leaving school. Yet perhaps Ralph's most enduring legacy is found not only in school records or government documents, but in the commonplace book he assembled in 1928. Nearly 100 years later, its pages offer a remarkable snapshot of how one educator viewed the American story. Every carefully written entry and preserved newspaper clipping reflects a man who believed that knowledge should be collected, organized, and passed on. The survival of the book is remarkable in itself. Through changing generations, economic hardships, family transitions, and nearly a century of history, it endured. Eventually, it found its way to an antique mall, where it was rediscovered by someone willing to look beyond its age and worn appearance. Ralph's life spanned more than 8 decades of American history. Born during the presidency of Grover Cleveland, he witnessed the rise of the automobile, 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the New Deal, and the arrival of the modern age. Throughout those years, he remained devoted to teaching, historical research, and preserving knowledge for future generations. On September 18, 1978, Ralph Willard Messner passed away at the age of 82. He was laid to rest at West Jamestown Cemetery in Jamestown, Indiana. Although his earthly journey ended there, the legacy of his work endured through the students he taught, the historical records he helped preserve, and the commonplace book that survived long after he was gone. Today, the commonplace book serves as both a historical artifact and a personal connection to the past. Through its pages, Ralph W. Messner remains more than a name in census records or school documents. He emerges as a teacher, husband, father, researcher, and lifelong learner whose voice still resonates 98 years after he first put pen to paper. His story is a reminder that history often survives through ordinary people whose lives quietly shaped their communities. Though nearly a century has passed since Ralph began his commonplace book, the information he preserved continues to educate and inspire new readers. In that sense, his voice still speaks, and it is still being heard 98 years later. So I hope you enjoyed that. And I just want to read down a list, which I will show in the video here shortly. But I want to read a list of something I wrote about all of the things that happened, not all of the things, but some major significant events that happened during Ralph Messner's lifetime. It is just an amazing time in history that he lived. And a lot of times, my husband and I will talk about this, how it would have been amazing to be born just in the late 1800s, before the turn of the century. That's when my great grandparents were born. And that is also when Ralph Messner was born. They just lived through so much, so many changes. And so I just kind of, wrote out a list, a timeline, because I wanted to, for myself, just to see what did he see in his lifetime. So beginning in he was born in 1896, and in 1898 was the Spanish-American War. 1908 was the Model T was introduced and launched. In 1912, there was the westward migration was ending. It was coming to an end. Of course, people didn't stop moving west, but it was the huge migration was ending at that time. 1914, World War I began. 1920 was women's suffrage. 1927, the television was invented. 1929 was the Great Depression, and the orphan train program ended at that time. That's a great story too. If anyone wants to research the orphan train, it was a fascinating thing that happened in American history that hardly anyone knows about. The 1930s, child labor ended. 1935, so the Social Security Act was passed. 1939 was World War II. 1947 was the Cold War. 1950 was the Korean War. 1955 was the Vietnam War. I added this one because I like Laura Ingalls Wilder. 1957, Laura Ingalls Wilder died. That gives you kind of a picture of, we all know Little House on the Prairie, most of us do, and the pioneer days that she lived through. And she died in 1957. So Ralph Messner was alive when she passed away. 1964, the Civil Rights Act was signed. In 1968, Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated, and so was Martin Luther King Jr. 1969, astronauts landed on the moon. In 1971, the first home use computer was invented. Now, that doesn't mean everyone had a computer in their home, but they were coming at that time. That was something he saw in his lifetime. And in 1973, the first mobile phone was invented. It's not what we know mobile phones to be today, the cell phones, but all of this technology was starting. So isn't it amazing to think of what he saw in his lifetime? And many of us who are listening, maybe some of you are older and you saw much of this happen. Maybe some of you are more like my age. You might have had great grandparents who lived during this time. So it is just an amazing study. I just, want to encourage anyone who's listening, if you have any kind of interest at all in history, just go find an antique mall and walk around and think about the people who lived in those times, who held those objects in their hands, and what their lives were like. And I think sometimes when we do that, we can realize that those people were real people who suffered through real things in their lives. This man lived through many wars. So he lived through let me see my list here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 6 that I have written down here, and the Great Depression. They went through a lot in their lifetimes, and sometimes we can start we can start to feel sorry for ourselves or feel like we're in a place of despair because things are hard for us. We may have circumstances in our lives that are difficult, only, personal circumstances. And so did all of the people in the past. They not only had their own personal problems and relationships and families and jobs and things like that, but they also had wars that they lived through. And if we can remember that we're not the first ones who have lived through a difficult time, we do live in difficult times right now, but the people of the past also lived through difficult times. And I believe that we can thank the Lord for the generation that He put us in. There have been many times when I've just wished that I was born back in the pioneer days, because I love that time period. I love their clothing from back then. I love everything they used and how they were out on the land, working the land, and they had the family unity where the family didn't, separate all day. They stayed together a lot and worked hard together. They had large families. I just like that time period. But I have to realize that God in His sovereignty put me here in this time period for whatever reason He did. And He's God and I'm not. And so He made that decision. And so we can learn to be thankful and be grateful that God in His sovereignty and His wisdom, He put us where He wanted us to be. And so we live here in 2026, and Ralph Messner, he lived a long, long time ago, and that's when God put him on the earth. And so I hope all of you are blessed by this. I hope you're grateful for all that God has done in your life, and just continue to let the Lord use you in whatever way He chooses. Use your gifts, use your talents, leave a legacy for the future generations and the people in your life who you love. All right, well, I'm going to let you go ahead and watch the rest of this video, and I'm going to sign off, and I just pray you all enjoyed this.